Ahmad,
Glad to have all of you. My pleasure.
Suna, Nastaran, everybody welcome. I think maybe we are good to go.
Okay.
So Dr. Khalid,
yes, absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining. It's really my pleasure and an honor to really present this material to you. The topic is going to be using org values from highly effective tech companies. So let me just go right ahead into it. What am I going to be touching upon today? First, I need to give some history. I need to really set the context for you in terms of something called DevOps methodology that actually has a set of values that are used at very highly effective companies like Amazon, Netflix, Google, Facebook, these values are summarized in the acronym COMS. And I'm going to tell you what this is all about once I set up the context. And I'm going to start by answering the question, why I believe, what's my hypothesis in thinking that this is important, and why I think this is applicable to all organizations, not just high-tech companies like these well-known companies and others. So, very quickly, let me just dig into it. Software engineering, it's really interesting to see the progression of this field. When computers were invented in the 50s and programming started to become, to become available for people to use to create applications and all that, it used to be, believe it or not, just hacking. So people will come up with an idea and they will just go and code it. They will just hammer it, and whatever happens, happens. And it was, once computers started and programs started penetrating everything, started penetrating a couple of things, they started realizing that these things are really running important things. Like, they're running factories, they're running nuclear factories, they're running airplanes, things that that are really important. And in order to make sure that they function properly, you can't just hack at it. When I teach software engineering classes, I always, the example I give my students, I tell them, imagine if I bought a piece of land and I bring an architect and I ask this architect, I really like to build a house and this is my dream house. And I give a couple of, some description to it. I wanted 2 floors. I want this many rooms, these types of features. And imagine if next day, immediately we just go to digging a hole and start building the villa or the house. What's wrong with this if we actually do it that way? And immediately the students will say, well, you can't do it without proper design and proper architecture. You run a couple of scenarios, et cetera, et cetera. So immediately it became clear that you need to, building software is engineering, because you have to plan, you have to analyze, you have to design, you have to develop, you have to deploy, you have to maintain, much like any engineering field. And that's how software engineering was created. And, don't worry about these details. That's when we dig into a lot of things. But the technology moved from one stage, one phase to another, and it evolved quite a bit. You probably hear now big data, cloud, virtualization. You hear these terms. This did not happen overnight, obviously. We started somewhere, and this picture kind of depicts the stages that this has gone through. Now, when we started with just building software, and we called it structured software, object-oriented was then, it became kind of a de facto standard. Then enterprise computing, because of the internet, became extremely important and extremely popular. And what I mean by enterprise computing is, systems that support millions and billions of people to get certain operations done, whatever they are. And now we evolve to even a higher level. But internally, in terms of how these organizations function, in order to be successful in building these highly successful software, a lot of things has happened. And one word that you'll notice in this slide that's really important is the silo culture. So you'll have, people who will do the analysis, people who will do the design. You have the coders, the people who do the development. And once it's released to the servers, the big servers that hosts these programs, we now are in operations. And a lot of times when problem happens, these companies, or older methodology companies, they realize that they're basically silos. Everybody fights with everybody. And they realize that they need to be efficient and effective, they need to really get rid of the silo culture. And they need to come up with all kinds of things in order to be able to release software very quickly, but with high quality. So Facebook is, if they don't do that, somebody else is going to come and eat their lunch immediately. Amazon, if they don't do that, somebody's going to eat their lunch. So it became obvious that there needs to be a way to really release software very quickly. Building software over 6 month cycles is not acceptable anymore. It's a recipe for failure. So these guys had to evolve and come up with things that will allow them to be extremely effective and very efficient with high quality. So they learned from all kinds of fields and they put all kinds of things together. This is a really interesting article about highly effective companies. And obviously, I just want to show you a couple of things. Amazon, for example, they are able to deploy code every 11.7 seconds. Can you imagine that? And this is high quality code. This is code that's not allowed to crash, not allowed to malfunction, not allowed to create a security loophole. This is code that is high quality, and they are able to release every 11.7 seconds. Obviously, this is like top of the pyramid. Netflix is not really, I'm going to mention Netflix actually several times during this presentation, and Target. I want to just, again, it's really interesting to read a lot of what's written here. A company like Etsy is a web shopping, niche kind of shopping website. They are at a point where they can do 50 deployments a day. Not 11.7 seconds, but 50 deployments a day is still extremely admirable. And keep in mind that we still have a lot of companies, organizations like banks and government, that they are still on 6 month cycle and even longer in terms of release. But if you understand a little bit, anyone actually watching how technology is evolving can immediately deduce that this is not going to be effective. And if they don't change things, they're going to be in trouble. So can we be effective? Can we learn from this? That's the question I'm posing. But then why? That's very important. Why is this important? And my hypothesis is that you must have heard the term, maybe you have not, but there's a term that's going around right now. I actually don't like it, but I hear it a lot from the tech people, softwareization of everything. It's really happening. You talk to people in communication, in manufacturing, in anything, they use that term. And that term cannot be made in other industries. For example, in manufacturing, we know everything is moving towards robotics. So if I'm in manufacturing, I better see what effects robotics is going to have on manufacturing, or I'm going to be in trouble. So I really need to do that. If I'm in, biomedical sciences, they are invading hospitals and clinics and all that. If I'm a doctor or a nurse or whatever, if I don't understand how these fields that are invading me are going to change things that I'm doing, I'm going to be in trouble. So when we're saying that everything is going to be softwareized and everything is going to be software, doesn't that mean that we really need to understand how these software companies function and how are they successful, or somebody's going to eat our lunch? So that's my hypothesis. We really must pay attention to elements of success at large software technology companies. Why? Because they're invading everything, and therefore we need to pay attention to them. So if I'm a university and everything is going to be softwareized, and I can imagine a couple of things that can happen, but probably there are things I can't yet imagine. If I don't build that culture and some technology ends up affecting education, but I'm not set up to quickly deploy that type of technology, another university is going to eat my lunch. That's the hypothesis that I'm making. And therefore, we must pay attention to this, and we need to apply what makes these big software companies successful. I think we need to apply it everywhere. So that's my hypothesis. And in this short presentation, I'm going to try to basically give you a starting point, because I think there is one. Because that's not an easy task, to look at this task and basically say, I'm going to find what all these big tech companies, what makes them successful, and I'm actually going to apply it and just feel that it's an easy task. Where do we start? And I think I do have something to share with you here, and that's really what I'm going to try to do in the remainder of this presentation. So there is something called DevOps. I'm not going to explain DevOps. It's basically a methodology that breaks the silos between development and operations in these large software companies. And it has contributed immensely at making these software companies extremely efficient. So DevOps is a good starting point. Okay, DevOps is a big topic. Where do we start? Luckily, there are a set of values for this DevOps methodology, and they summarize it in those acronyms, CALMS. And it stands for, the C is for culture, automation, A is for automation, L is for lean, and they borrow that completely from lean manufacturing and from industrial engineering. So actually they borrow a lot of stuff from lean. So L is for lean, M is for measurement to get feedback loops, and S is for sharing. And I think in each one of those, there's something to learn and something we can actually implement. And to be honest with you, I function through these values. When I look at how we can improve as an organization, as an institution, I feel, and in the past 3 years, this has actually been extremely effective for me. I feel that I've been more effective when my thoughts are organized around this. And it allowed me to really come up with a couple of initiatives that I feel were really successful. So I have also personal experience that makes me believe that this is really a good starting point. So is there a good resource for this? Actually, I'm using this book, the DevOps Handbook. This is a really good book. The guys who wrote it, Gene Kim and Jiz Humble, and they have another book called The Phoenix Project. And it's basically actually a novel about a company, a fictitious company, and how it became successful and solved a lot of their problems by using DevOps. But then they wrote this book, and it has a lot of recipes for IT companies on how to move to DevOps. So I borrowed a lot of stuff from this book, and you're going to see a lot of the examples I use are actually from this book. Okay, let me do this. Let me start with, I'm going to go through them. C, culture. What do these guys say about the importance of culture? You can't set out to basically say, I'm going to change my organization culture. That's actually, people who study this, they tell you that's not a goal to have. What you can change is our habits. So you can actually basically say, okay, I want to change my culture such that I can lend myself to highly effective practices. Great. But you can't just start by enforcing that. It doesn't work. You can't change culture by declaring I want to change culture. You can't do that. You need to filter that and try to think of the habits that are characteristics of that culture. You work on changing those habits, And then collectively, over time, these habits end up changing the environment towards that culture. So that's very, very, very important. And there's a lot of writing about this, but in terms of software companies, they really focused on, and there's actually people who study this area in business and org behavior. They actually, that's where they borrowed this from. There are, they divide organizations to three different types. So you have a dictatorship organization, you have a bureaucratic organization, you have a generative organization, and each has their way of managing things. So, is the information in your organization, is it hidden, is it ignored, or is it actively sought? Are the messengers, people who come up with news, bad news, things that are happening, are they shut, are they isolated, or are they trained and nurtured so that can be more effective next time in bringing up, coming up with these messages? Responsibilities, when you try to distribute responsibilities or ask for people to do something, are they shirked? Are they put into compartments, or are they shared? Bridging between these silos, remember the silos that I talked about? Are they, is this bridging between the silos discouraged? Everybody is their own entity and, don't touch me and all that. Or is it just allowed, but, okay. Or is it actually rewarded? Oh, great, you created that bridging thing. That's really cool. Failure, is failure covered? People who are fear, they're just scared to share failure. Is it, okay, accepted? But, it's just accepted and the environment is just and merciful? Or is the failure, is it the type that, is the organization structure such that it promotes inquiry? And then novelty, is it crushed? Does it cause problems, or is it implemented? So these are a set of good questions. And actually, I'd like to run a quick Kahoot survey right now, if you don't mind. So if you have, on your computer, real quick, if you can just go to kahoot.it. So join kahoot.it and put in that code, 3944942. Yeah, by the way, you don't feel obliged to put your real name, put code if you want. And then I'm going to be, there are just basically 6 simple questions, and just answer one question I'm sorry, pick one answer in these questions. And although the survey actually allows you to pick multiple, but please don't do that. Just pick one, and then we can move forward. Okay. We have 9 people. That's good enough sample. Let me start the survey. So what is what do you believe where, organization, your org culture is? So in my organization, information is it hidden, actively sought, or ignored? Pick one, please. And don't worry, there's, we really don't have a winning answer. Just it shows you where we're. Okay, we'll go to the next. Is the messenger shut, isolated, or trained? Okay. So trained. In my organization, responsibilities are shirked, compartmentalized, or shared. Did it? Oh my goodness! Maybe I clicked it.
Yeah, it didn't give us.
It didn't allow us to do it, so that's okay. Sorry. I want to move the mouse away. So in my organization, bridging is discouraged, allowed, rewarded. All right. So we have allowed. Okay. Next. In my organization, failure is covered, taken justly and mercifully, or promotes inquiry. Okay. And finally, in my organization, novelty is crushed, causes problems, or implemented. All right. No, there's, scores are not really important. Let me. If I'm, I need to, yeah. Let me turn off. Let me turn off, stop the video here a little bit, or my background.
We cannot see.
Yeah. So notice, if we have a graph, we're like this, okay? This audience, all right? So and really where organizations want to be, and that's not unusual, right? I mean, this is actually expected because you want, in a generative organization, you want to be here at the green line. And you will get a curve like this. And we did, this little survey of 21, we had 10 people participating. It just gives you a taste of what you usually find in your organization. And that actually tells you what you really need to do and areas you want to work on in terms of habits that will lead to a generative organization, whereby, information is really actively sought. You try to really engage in that. When you get news, no matter how bad it is, investigate and try, messengers don't bring bad news always in a proper way, but don't focus on how proper it is, but focus on, okay, what's the problem? But then how can I train my people so that the messages is done properly every time. All focused on really trying to improve our organization, etc. These are things that one can really pay attention to. And so how do we use this? I find this to be extremely relevant, right? When an error occurs, when somebody commits an error, is it a culture where immediately everybody starts pointing fingers and start the blaming game? Or is it a culture where investigation is actually done, trying to find out what the problem is, and actually when it's fixed and the system is actually more solid, things are put in place so that next time we are more resilient, and those people who even were responsible for the failure, they're actually rewarded for what has happened, then that's a generative culture. And you can see, the extremes in a dictatorship where, responsibility, messengers, bridging is all looked at negatively, and a generative organization, well, these things are, they're looked at positively. So we need to go for the generative habits. Automation. So A is for automation. In software companies, software comes into stages. So there's, and again, I'm not going to explain any of this. What commit is, what build is, what test is, what stage is, what deploy is, what's continuous integration, or continuous delivery, or continuous testing, or continuous deployment. And, somebody like Amazon, they're at continuous deployment. Some of the organizations, I once was in a meeting in a bank with some IT people, and they don't even have continuous integration. So their automation is really poor. These guys use a lot of software in order to automate a lot of the things in this journey for taking software into production. This is a local company called Arkinova that I know the people working at. This is just a sample of software that can be used at each stage of the way in order to create an automation pipeline whereby, somebody like someplace like Amazon, when the developers are done from whatever they're doing, they push a button, it automatically goes to production. This is a dream, right? Because in high quality software organization, security people need to check it. There are, people who need to check the code. There are all kinds of things that have to happen. Managers have to approve. They have to plan to deploy. These guys who deploy need to plan on a weekend where they stay all night. All these things happen. And in a place like Amazon, it's a push of a button. How did they get from there to something so efficient, so effective? They have an unbelievable automation pipeline where all kinds of things happen automatically using all these products. And again, I'm not going to explain what every of these products do, but the point here is that you need to really look at automation with, you need to look at it positively and try to think of how can I automate certain things that I'm doing using software? Is that possible? And automation usually needs to be done gradually. But imagine if you're doing automation on a poor process. You don't want to do that, because if you automate a poor process, you're still going to get poor result. So that's why the L, lean, is also very important in this columns. So culture, automation. So I need to be sensitive to automation, but then I also need to be lean. And lean basically, again, if there's anybody from our colleagues in industrial engineering, they can teach us a lot of stuff about that. I'm sure you have heard the term Six Sigma. And it's all about how do you, first of all, find your process. They call it your value stream. How do you find the nodes within that value stream? Do a mapping and try to understand how much time does it take you going from one node in this value stream to another, how much time you waste in between, and try to improve that. So there's a process for that. And believe it or not, big software companies, they actually took all of that and they implemented dearly within them. And there's a process for doing this value stream, trying to identify those nodes, try to find the time that's wasted, try to improve that process. Once they improve that process, then they implement automation on top of it. And they do a lot of this thing called PDCA, plan, do, check, act. This is a cycle that they engage in big time. I plan, I do, I investigate and check, and I try to learn from these and then act and then do it again and keep doing it. This is called dimming cycle. It's a very, very well-known cycle, and the artist in implementing this is Toyota. You know, you can't talk about lean without mentioning Toyota. So everything related to lean is actually taken, a lot of it is taken from Toyota. I always like to talk about Toyota's Andon cord. They have this thing called the Andon cord. It's a cord that's available on their manufacturing line. Look at this culture, how transparent it is. If somebody on the assembly line sees a particular problem, they pull an Andon line, and if they do, a manager comes and checks, and if there's actually a problem, they don't hide the problem, because their philosophy is that if you keep a problem hidden, eventually it becomes such a big problem, it's hard to manage. So they actually would stop the entire production line until that problem is fixed. Usually fix it quickly. They give, I think, number of seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And if it's not fixed, they actually stop the production line and they do something called swarming, where all the relevant people will swarm on that problem. It becomes everybody's problem. Nobody is left alone. They don't blame. They immediately start trying to fix that problem. It's really cool. I wanna show you this this video. It's 2 minutes, but I'm gonna show you a couple of seconds in it. Do you see this?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So in their manufacturing line.
Is there sound?
Yeah. Always when I'm in Zoom, the sound is an issue. But anyways, I don't want to really have you.
You can change it from.
I like to comment on it. You see, this is the Andon line now. And if somebody finds a problem, he pulls the line. Now, a manager is notified. So 26 is actually, it lights up. So a manager finds, okay, there's a problem here. We need to find out what's going on. So a manager, he found the problem. He pulls the Andon line. A manager comes immediately to try to look at that problem. Okay? And notice, once that manager comes, he'll look at that problem, and they'll start, he'll look at it and all that. If it's okay and they feel it's, actually it's not an issue or it can be resolved, he'll give instruction, he'll pull the line again, and it actually, the issue is resolved within those 10 seconds that they have. If it doesn't get resolved, and now it'll show you, the entire assembly process will stop. So that assembly process will actually cease, will stop until that problem is solved. And this light, as time passes, will change to red until that problem is solved. Extremely transparent culture, and a lot, these software companies learned a lot from the lean principle in general. And reading about it, you'll actually see that Toyota is mentioned a lot in that. So automation and lean, there's this example at Google Web Services where this tech lead, Mike Bland, and this lead, Bharat Medirata, they found out that in Google Web Services, developers reached a point where they are scared to actually make a mistake, extremely scared. So what did they do? First, they worked on the culture that, we need to change this culture. We're not going to really come hard on anyone because they made a mistake, but then we're going to put automation and testing. So we're going to commit to really efficient automated testing. So they worked on the culture, they worked on automation and being really lean with respect. So they implemented a lot of lean principles. And what they found out was the results were startling. And then once they were able to achieve that success, they started publicizing that success so people can learn from that. This is a company in Australia that had 10 streams of an extremely awkward process. In software, we call it waterfall model. Extremely inefficient process. So they worked on making that process agile. So they worked on agility. They changed their process, improved all of these, introduced automation in the tool stream, and basically they were able to achieve unbelievable successes out of that. And it's an interesting actually use case. So what do we learn from that? Be brave, redesigning and changing your methodology and your process. Change it. Imagine you're used to doing something. A methodology is a really precious thing. When an organization is used to doing something one way, and you come and you say, we want to change that methodology. We're going to redesign the whole process. Not only that, we're going to introduce automation, and we like people to really buy into that. That requires a lot of courage, right? But again, automation and lean with culture was something that made these people successful. Let me just, I want to move a little bit quicker here. So how do we use this? We need to understand our processes. That's something I really feel strongly about. Having processes is important, but not every process is engraved in stone. It's not holy. Organizations need to be open to studying those processes and trying to improve them. And we can improve that, and there are, this is science. It's not something that you can redesign the whole process. You can improve certain nodes by improving the time it takes in a node or the time it takes to get into a node. And then use automation tools whenever possible, because that will improve your process tremendously. Don't introduce automation tools for the sake of automation, because automation into a poor process, you're going to get the same, it's garbage in, garbage out. So improve your process, then introduce automation tools. It will create amazing results. And start small and publicize success. Don't expect that everybody in your organization will buy into that. That's not going to be possible. So there are always heroes. There are always people who are anxious or eager to learn and do things differently. Pick on those and then try to work with them to create small success stories and then publicize the success so that everybody starts paying attention and maybe they'll buy into it. So that's how do we use this lean and automation from columns. Measurement. So this is the M in measurement. In software, in IT, we measure everything. We measure speed, we measure quality, we measure stability, we measure security, we can even measure culture. And this is interesting, that provided me a different way of looking at some of the HR surveys. Like you measure your retention rates, you measure faculty satisfaction, student satisfaction. This is actually a measure, it actually measures the success of your culture in a way. So we can measure all kinds of things. And then we can create telemetry so that we actually are able to see feedback of things that are happening that can allow us to improve. If I want to redesign my process, if I want to introduce automation, if I want to introduce habits that can change the culture, and I don't have data, you're doomed. It's just not going to work. So that's why actually these software companies are amazing in putting in gauges everywhere. A really good example is this at Etsy. Etsy is mentioned a lot. This is actually, not many people know this shopping website, but they're really very efficient, very effective. In 2011, they were tracking over 200,000 production metrics, and they are readily available. They actually released an open source tool for companies who want to use their mechanism for plugging in these gauges. Imagine in your car, these sensors that sense all kinds of things, and they come into your, your dashboard when something goes wrong. your car may have 2,000, 3,000 sensors that report all kinds of things. Imagine 200,000. This is unbelievable, but actually it speaks to the success of ITSE in developing DevOps practices or values. So measurement is really important, and showing these measurements is important so that there's no hidden reality. Sometimes, people shy away from actually exposing the data that they're measuring, but that defeats the purpose. Measure, make it as, first, obviously, massage the data so it's useful, so people don't misinterpret the data, but then publish it so that there is no hidden reality. Everybody is aware of what's going on. Remember the undone chord. I think this is a really good visual example. There is nobody's trying to hide a problem that's happening. No, I'm gonna actually let immediately somebody know. Not only that, the whole factory is gonna be, or that assembly line is gonna be aware there's a problem, and possibly the factory. Amazon actually implemented this undone chord in their system. If there's a problem with a particular product, managers have the ability, they have something analogous to the undone chord. They can pull the undone chord on that product, and that undone product is totally frozen until the problem is solved, no matter how much it costs. So, when you are able to measure and you are able to be transparent about your measurement, then everybody in the value stream shares the same view. So imagine if we have that, then all faculty, all admissions, finance, everybody shares the same view about what's going on. And when a problem occurs, we don't blame because everybody is aware. It's like, okay, we actually have seen this coming. How can we help? And we organize how help is delivered and deployed. Then we become extremely efficient and effective. Again, at Netflix, I have a really nice story about, because Netflix, they actually use Amazon Web Services for all their tech stuff. But they actually run complex statistics tools to try to even predict where issues may happen and react to them. So they take measurement even a step further. So when measurements come, they run data analytics on it to try to predict what can happen, what failure can happen, where and when, so that they can react to it. So they have taken that a step further. How do we use this? Sorry. How do we use this? And we need to measure and be transparent. And we need to create a culture of swarming to assist. And we're working on creating this RIT dashboard. And I really would like to, I don't know if Orshi is here, or Daisel is here, or Preeti is here, or Huda is here. If you are, I want to, really commend them for working on this. It's work in progress. We're trying to create this dashboard, but basically they have over the past, this is a work in progress for a long time. But now Career Services is able to create at RIT this set of numbers that are readily available all the time, and it's updated twice a week, so it's real time. IE, Institutional Effectiveness, is able to create this dashboard with all kinds of data that are relevant and statistics that's updated once a week. So it's almost real time. What are they working on? How many files they have processed? What's pending? What's late? All that type of stuff. And really, imagine if we are able to do that with advising, library, tutoring, research, conferences, basically where a dashboard is seamlessly and effectively. Because when I worked with Career Services and IE, the key thing was, if it takes a lot of time to keep this real time, then we still need more work. Maybe we need to do more automation. We need to do, but if it's part of our work, where something happens, you get used to updating these, then that's beautiful. So we've been sitting on this to make sure that it can be real time. And really, the idea is eventually to be as transparent as possible. And imagine what would that create? again, in terms of culture, in terms of having a common reality across the university. That's how these high-tech companies are successful. I think that will make us also successful. I'm after that hypothesis, and I think if it worked for them, it should work for us. Last, S for sharing, and I'm getting close. How do we share? I mentioned Netflix already, and I will mention Netflix again here. This is a story that I always tell because it requires a lot of bravery. By the way, in my slides, wherever I put this icon here, it means that I picked that example from that book. So if you've been noticing that, it's so I actually put the icon for that book to tell you that that's where I got the example from. Netflix in 2011, the entire Amazon Web Services in the East Coast went down. Everybody who was using Amazon Web Services went down except Netflix. They were the exception. Why? Because in 2009, they re-architected their monolith Java Enterprise Edition application. And they made it, they re-architected the whole thing, but then they promoted learning. How did they learn? They created a group of tools. They called it Chaos Monkeys. Actually, they called it the Symbian Army. The group of tools, they called it Symbian Army. So it's an army of monkeys. One of them is the Chaos Monkey. And the reason they came up with this name is that imagine if you let a monkey on a data center. What would that monkey do? It will start pulling cables and all that. So they said, okay, let's create tools, software tools, that will act like a Chaos Monkey. So we'll run that tool, and that tool will randomly start bringing servers down. And let's see how our backup systems, how do they operate and how they function? What can we learn from this? Imagine how brave they are in instituting a learning environment that actually can tolerate this. It's pre-planned, the culture is there, everybody is available, right? So they engineered it properly, but once they pull the plug, servers will start coming down, and they will see how, they will learn how their system is actually acting. And then from that experience, they will go back and try to fix things and improve things and make them stronger. They started that 2009. 2 years later, they didn't know that on April 21st, 2011, Amazon Web Services, the entire East Coast is just gonna go down. They didn't know that. But their culture, their investment on being resilient paid off. That day when everybody went down, and remember 2011, Amazon wasn't that popular, and maybe part of their popularity is maybe because of that event. That was maybe one turning point for them, when actually everybody was not available and they were. So another really nice one is at Target. Target, they actually have space that they will use to come as groups and try to create activities and challenges so that they learn from them. It's really elaborate. I really, just go to Dojo. Dojo is I think it's a Japanese word, but it stands for, a point in time that you start learning or reflecting, something like that. So go to dojo.target.com and you'll see, Target, obviously, for you who are not unfamiliar with the US, it's a very big, it's a very large department store in the United States. But it's really, there's a lot to be learned looking at how they do sharing and so that they learn from each other. So how do we use this? Hold events that promote sharing, experience, and learning. Encourage a sharing session after every conference, competition, workshop, certification. And I can give a lot of examples. Like for example, we're currently going through ABIT. We're going to start ABIT accreditation for our undergraduate engineering programs, and we have two of our faculty members. They went to a workshop, maybe even before the pandemic, so almost a year now, because there are a lot of changes in ABIT. So they went to a workshop. they did a workshop for us once, a couple of weeks back, and I thought it was extremely useful. I learned a lot. I've personally written probably a couple of ABIT self-studies. I've been managing, working with my colleagues here at RIT Dubai, worked when we joined, and we're working on it right now and all that. And I tell you, I learned quite a bit from that workshop. So it keeps me thinking, this never fails. Trying to create a mechanism whereby we actually encourage people to go places, but then when they come, encourage them to share what they learned with us. So, and I can keep mentioning examples about things that have happened. We learned from them, we implemented them, and things that are in process and we're working on. So, final words. Definitely everything needs to start from a vision. As an organization, if you don't have a vision, you still have a problem. You need to really have a vision. But once you have a vision, and that vision incorporates being a leader, then there's a hypothesis that I wanted to share with you in this presentation. And the hypothesis is software is penetrating everything. And as a result, and I gave examples as to why, we need to pay attention of how you can be successful in places where you're bringing in software and you're making software. And there are a lot of good examples in big tech companies that are killing it, like Amazon, like Facebook, like and even department stores like Walmart and Target that are killing it because they introduced, they became actually premier IT companies. So we need to look at them, find out what is it that they're doing, and maybe learn from them. My hypothesis is that there is actually a set of values.
For you to get up from lying down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Hamid, maybe you can can mute.
Yeah.
So thank you. So so in this presentation, I tried to present to you a set of values and the main methodology that are making these organizations extremely successful. And these are the CALM values: culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. Try to give some examples about how they were successful and try to kind of project that into our environment to the best of my ability with the time I have. So I'm promoting using those values. And if so, then I really have a couple of other suggestions. We need to start small. It's so easy to get excited listening to all of this and basically say, okay, tomorrow we're going to implement this, we're going to implement that. Blah, blah, blah. That it doesn't work. We need to start small with principles that make sense, and try to pick small projects that also don't affect the university, and try to implement some of these principles in them and be successful. And once successful, try to publicize these. And as we're doing this, we need to keep in mind the adoption curve. This bell curve is in everything, right? With your students, you have the bell curve. With administration, you have the bell curve. With faculty, you have the bell curve. But even in the adoption, it's also a bell curve, whereby when you introduce something new, there are always a set of innovators that really buy into it. They want to be on it. And then you have the early adopters, then the early majority, late majority, and then you have always the laggard that once they see everybody that bought into something, they'll join when it's all done. And that's life. But always, I think this is there are always people who are ready to go and we're ready to champion certain new ideas. We always need to really promote that, try to facilitate the environment that makes it successful, and then we need to publicize that success. All right, wow. I actually have 4 minutes. If anyone has a question, please shoot. How did I do, Majda? You're ready to go for your presentation?
Dr. Khaled, I think Hamid has a question on.
Let me see where I can go here. Okay. How hard would it be to automate? Sorry, let me see if I have to go up. CS board members mentioned that words are a lot. Okay. How hard would it be to automate? Well, it depends on the problem, right? I mean, what are you automating? I mean, this is very important. And you cannot automate the whole university overnight. You can't automate everything overnight. That's not going to happen. That's why I say you pick a small area that there's a lot of pain in, and then try to understand the process involved in that area, improve the process. And this is science. I mean, there's so much that can be learned from lean. In doing that, there is also a mechanism, you know, really complex processes. And luckily in a university, we really don't have a lot of complex ones. But even if it's really, really complex, there's actually a mechanism going into a room, picking a team, doing what we call value stream mapping, you know, on a board with Post-it notes. There is actually a mechanism for doing that, mapping it, working, discussing, changing things until we come up with what is it now, where we, you know, how we can improve it. Once you improve the process, then, okay, this is so much manual, so much time we waste here because it's manual. Bingo. That's a place where you want to automate. Let's go find the software that will allow us to automate that area in this efficient process that I already designed. And I know now I'm spending a lot of time in it because it's manual. You know, you cannot lose by automating that. Dr. Muhammad is saying he's already placed that book in his shopping cart. Good luck, Dr. Muhammad. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ghassan. I really appreciate your comment.
Thank you, Doctor. Great presentation. Thank you.
Any other questions? 1 minute. All right. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khaled.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. I really appreciate you giving me your time this afternoon. I hope, or this evening. I hope this was useful. You know, I'm in my room anytime you like to discuss this. This is dear to my heart, so I'd love to talk about any element of that. And this is recorded, so we're going to make it available. Fadi's going to help out to making it available.
Maybe on my courses.
And also, we're going to try to put it on my courses. Yeah. All right, you guys have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your time and interest. And thank you, Dr. Khaled. And we'll see you next month session, inshallah.